Hello, my name is Alistair Joshua, and I will be presenting to you on my assignment 2 that is based on human development theories. So, this presentation will be elaborating on the various human development theories, philosophies, perceptions, and constructs based on the social cultural context. Accompanying this Word document is a PowerPoint presentation sharing the essence about this topic and how it is relevant towards my own context, my island home, Rotuma. So in this slide, I will be focusing on how I perceive human development in my respective contexts, with reference to Vygotsky's theory of social development. In my island back at home, and like all other Pacific countries in the region, most of what we engage in is done on a collective basis, namely villages, Itu'u, clans, Rirotu, churches, and so forth. With reference to Vygotsky's theory, I believe his theory is more relevant to this context because his theory believes that children develop on certain stages independently through social interactions. And you can clearly see that in figure 1, where the people are interacting with the priest and everything is done on a more collective basis. He further claims that we are all born with what he refers to as elementary mental functions, and it is through our social and cultural interactions that allows us to utilize these elementary skills to develop towards gaining the highest point of mental function. And he adds that this occurs in what he identifies as the zone of proximal development. This zone simply represents what we can accomplish with the assistance of someone who is more advanced, or rather more knowledgeable other. For instance, an adult, peers, technology, or a friend, etc. And this is evident back at home where we do things collectively, that is, working together in order to reach a certain goal or completing a certain obligation. Fatongia, and it is through these aspects that allows us to be more developed in the future. And as you can see in figure 2, where the child is in the zone of proximal development, accompanied with the more knowledgeable other, and this picture includes the parents. So I, for one, have witnessed such a real life scenario because my mother and her sisters are the ones that have raised me, and it is through our daily conversations and activities that has encouraged me to be more equipped due to the support from the more knowledgeable other. For instance, prayer meetings, moral storytelling, lessons, folklore, games, manea, and etc. This slide simply explains to us the connection between speech and mental concepts. And through this, I was able to understand the importance of daily conversations and how important it is to us as humans, regardless of the maturity levels and cognitive abilities, etc. He further explains that through these conversations, it allows our inner speech and spoken language to be independent. As a growing child, my mother would speak to me and my siblings almost every single day, till this very day. And I believe it is through this that I'm able to be more vocal and critical in terms of my daily engagements. And you can clearly see this in figure 3, where the parent is interacting and communicating, creating a conversation with her children through storybooks and that. In the following slides, I will be discussing 2 Western theories, which are Erikson's psychosocial theory and Freud's psychosexual theory of development. Let us start by talking about the 8 stages that a person is to encounter from birth till death. And mind you, in each stage explains itself distinctively from various aspects based on Erikson's psychosocial theory of development. So, as you can see, the first stage is trust versus mistrust. The moment we are born into this world is the very moment we develop a sense of trust or mistrust, depending on who's raising us. In this stage, infants often ask themselves unwittingly whether they can trust someone, and it is through this stage that most infants learn that they can trust if they are good caregivers and will fail to trust if they encounter fear and doubt. And you can, I think this figure really depicts of what I have just said. The second stage is autonomy versus shame or doubt. At this stage, the child begins to make their own decisions and choices on certain elements in the environment, namely toys, food, clothing, etc. And if the child accomplishes this process, they earn what they call the sense of autonomy or the me do it stage. If given the green light to explore their options independently without intrusion, the results can be optimistic, where it gives him or her the sense of self-independence and self-esteem. If otherwise, it will resultantly lead to self-doubt and low self-esteem. And yes, I think figure 5 clearly explains that. The third stage is initiative versus guilt. In this stage, we take the initiative to initiate ourselves socially to others, and this is most present in the preschool level. The child begins to mingle and interact with others, and it is at this stage that one begins to have a sense of ambition and responsibility, and this is encouraged if the child is given the freedom to explore their options and follow their interests. However, if the child is held back and is disagreed on, they are subjected to develop a guiltiness, thus lack self-initiative. And you can clearly see this in these two images, where the image on the right explains a more optimistic aspect, whereas the image on the left explains otherwise. The fourth stage is industry versus inferiority. We discover ourselves and take interest in the fact that we are uniquely different. In this stage, the child feels the pride to be more industrious if he or she receives encouragement, praise, and recognition for their hard work. However, those that get negative feedback and aren't encouraged by their teachers, parents, and friends, then they are more vulnerable to becoming unsuccessful in life and may develop incompetence, loss, and to make things worse, they will feel inferior. And I think you can, this image explains itself for what I've just previously said, where if the child is being praised by the teacher, that is, you can clearly see that on image on the right. And if the child is not praised or is not given much attention, then that will be based on the image that's on the left. The next stage is the fifth stage, which is identity versus role confusion. As we gear towards adolescence, we learn that we have roles to partake as students, children and friends, etc. It is at this stage that we need to successfully complete, as one wrong move will affect one's own life completely, and the impacts can be drastic. If the child is given the green light to explore oneself regardless of the repercussions, they will in turn acquire a strong sense of self and independency. If otherwise, that is, if they are pushed to live according to their parents' expectations, then they are more vulnerable to a state of self-identity crisis, confusion, and loss. And this is clearly depicted in these two images, and I think they clearly explain themselves. The sixth stage is intimacy versus isolation. Growing in this stage, we are simply centered about forming relationships with those around us mutually or collectively. In this stage, we begin to explore who we are and ask rational questions about building a relationship with someone intimately. Those that are successful in this stage become happy and content and confident with others, and those that don't will suffer isolation and loneliness. And I think you can clearly see this in these two images, and I think they clearly explain themselves. The seventh stage is generativity versus stagnation. This is the emerging silverhead stage where we learn about those who are in their 40s contribute towards the development of others, such as community service, volunteering, mentoring, and child nurturing. Those who are in this stage find themselves who are doing such activities are developing a more optimistic and meaningful experience, but for those who fail to do so, will eventually feel less productive and unworthy in their respective surroundings. You can refer this to figure 10. Finally, the last stage, which is integrity versus despair. This is officially the silverhead stage and the final stage where things are more in motion than when one is on the previous stages. It is the stage where people simply turn back the pages and visit their past life timelines and evaluate if they were content and proud of their life back then. Those that have successfully conquered will feel more content, peace, and integrity, and those that don't are subjected to stream through a few regrets, but mainly despair, unhappiness, and bitter. And you can clearly see this in these two images where the woman on the right looks more deprived, more in a more despair state, whereas the woman on the right feels she's looking at back through her album. She feels happy and content of her previous timeline. Freud's theory is one theory that elaborates more of our bodies and that entails that there are 5 critical stages that one needs to pass as we grow. According to Freud, child sex drive are focused on different areas of their body called the erogenous zone, and they are called the oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital. If we ever at one point fail to complete these stages, we become fixated or stuck on this stage, such as depression and addiction, to name a few. So the oral phase simply entails how we discover the world through oral contact, and one in particular is sucking of a mother's breast. First reflexes. Freud believes that if a child does not meet this need, the child may resort to negative habits such as thumb or nail biting. You can clearly see this in figure 12, which is the figure that's on the right. You can see the mother's breastfeeding the child. And the second phase is the anal phase. The anal phase is during the time where toddlers and preschoolers begin to experiment on the urine and feces, and this is the stage where they learn to control their bladder and bowel movements. Failure to do so can lead to obsession. You can see this on figure left, on the figure that's on the left side, sorry. The phallic stage, the phallic phase, simply allows us to discover the differences between the male and female gender. The stage where a boy will feel attached to their mother is called the Oedipus complex, and where a girl will feel attached to their fathers is called Electra complex. You can see this on the two images that's placed on the right, where you can see the son is more attached to the mother and the daughter is more attached towards the father. The latency phase is simply the stage where children develop the superego, where they conform to the norms of the society and will begin to adapt to a morally oriented self-representation. And it is at this stage where you can see the groups are more in their same-sex groups rather than mingling with those of the opposite sex. Finally, the genital phase is from 12 years onwards, and it is at this stage that our sexual desires come to birth, of which we engage in appropriate sexual behaviors, leading to matrimony, also known as weddings. Human development, in my own context, is an unceasing journey, and like any other Pacific Island country, human development has so much gaps to fill, especially in a society where modern culture is more influential by the minute. Our parents and our families are the key contributors towards our well being as growing adults, and we are often given moral values on a daily basis to prepare us for the world outside. Education is one aspect that is always ringing in our ears every day, and because our families are who are still unable to fend for themselves, and like most, education is the key to flee from such socio-economic hiccups. Moreover, going to church and attending obligatory needs of the church, we believe helps us to grow spiritually, to acquire a state of mind, peace, and contentment. In today's world, the spirituality of oneself is often seen as a shadow and not as a person. And for our people, we believe that religious aspects help in making this world a better place, bringing color and favor to all humanity. You can see that the image is on the left, which is my church back at home, Sumi, next to my village. Lastly, the golden age are indeed the golden ages because they symbolize our heritage, our culture, our identity, our people. In our respective districts, Itu, we are embodied in a hierarchical order where our respect towards our elders are beyond compare, in contrast with other countries, as they are the gems of all our being as Ritumans, full of knowledge about all of what our island is today and they hold the key to the past and also the bridge to the future. And it is these factors that helps the younger generation to be as equipped and as efficient in the nearby future. And I extracted an image that is my grandfather, the Silver Age, and he has really incorporated a lot of knowledge from his past stories, our culture, and it has really helped us, especially in the midst of this Western culture that's been overpowering most of the Pacific Islanders in the region. I will now draw your attention to the current perspective of human development, of which I will make reference to Piaget's stages of cognitive development to explore some views of human development. Piaget's initial interest were on animals, of which he published a scientific paper about albino sparrows in the year 1907 when he was just 11 years of age. He came to a realization that younger children were prone to make more mistakes than the older children, of which conclusion was made that they thought differently, and so he began his studies from there on. Piaget believed that in order for someone to reach the full human intelligence, they have to go complete the 4 stages of cognitive development, and they are the sensory motor stage, pre-operational stage, concrete operational stage, and the formal operational stage. So the sensory motor stage briefly explains that we initiate through our experiences and our 5 senses, where we begin with our reflexes, formulating our first ever habits, curious of things beyond the body, developing memory, or in other words, object permanence. Curiosity kills the cat is what the child is most at in this stage, like touching, smelling, or even trying to eat everything. Also, improved physical mobility, where the child learns to sit, walk, and crawl, leading to cognitive development. However, the child remains egocentric, where one understands the world from one's own perspective. The pre-operational stage, that is the figure on the right, going from the left to right, the second figure that is. The pre-operational stage is more of having intuition of thoughts, where the child has lots of imagination and make-believe thoughts like playing pretend, for example, which allows the child to learn a lot of new things. Around the ages of 5 to 6, the child becomes so curious and asks so much questions about almost everything, and this is called the intuitive state, where because while realizing we have sufficient knowledge, one does not know where one has got it from. Thus, thinking is still egocentric, An excellent example, is my small sister named Anna, of which I'm glad to have identified of how relevant and how current it is today. The fourth, the concrete operational stage, is basically the logic stage where we can make proper arrangements of things in an orderly manner. Also, we develop inductive reasoning and conservation, where our brain further learns to arrange thoughts and build concrete operational and mental structures. Hence, we apply them in our daily conversations. Thus, we come to the conclusion that everyone is unique. Lastly, is the far more operational stage, where we are teenagers and we now have rational thoughts about certain concepts and events. Our cognitive abilities are more developed and we understand why people behave the way they do. Thus, we learn to be compassionate towards others. All in all, I would simply like to conclude that these theories of human development, which are based on scientific researches and studies, has allowed me as a grown adult to explain, understand, and predict individual behavior and development, to not only understanding people, but to personally come up with ideas and solutions to help them to grow a pair of new wings. For I believe this life is only lived once, and to live once is to live it with true meaning and purpose. So thank you all for your time, and I hope you have enjoyed my presentation, and have yourself a safe and sound and also a happy mid-semester break. No, I am a terane leisi sa takoa.